All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Tennis Channel Inside In on the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. Mitch Michals from the Santa Monica studios. Really fun time in the tennis and the sporting calendar. We've got action at the Paris Olympics, tennis, and a ton of other sports. Just a great time. And we're going to be joined now by an expert, a professional journalist for a long time in the game, has been standard, working for CNN International. Before that, she was a highly touted junior player in the UK, played in Junior Wimbledon, played at the University of Tennessee, where she was an All-American, and is joining us now on Tennis Channel Inside In from Paris, site of the Olympics. Candy Reid, welcome to the show. First time, long time coming, but excited to talk tennis with you.
Me too, Mitch. Thank you. I'm a big fan of Tennis Channel and everyone who works on it. You make the game of tennis really exciting to both watch and listen to.
I should point out, too, and I really do appreciate that on behalf of my esteemed and much more talented colleagues, but you've heard Candy Reid on Tennis Channel's airwaves, world feed announcer, too. There's always tennis to be played, so you have been on our airwaves at all hours of the day, too, so we know that. But it's exciting, and before we get to the Olympics, I kind of wanted to get your backstory as a first-time guest. You know, everyone knows you now as a journalist worldwide, based in the UK, working over here now in Atlanta at CNN International. But you were a highly touted tennis player. You fell in love with the game at an early age, and you played it to nearly the highest level. Did that organically develop on your own? Did you have family influences? How did the love affair with tennis start in your life?
Well, it turns out my maternal grandmother actually played Junior Wimbledon, but I don't think I got my tennis love from her. It just so happened that I did come from a sporty background. My father was just underneath international cricket level. My mother was a professional dancer. The grandmother I was speaking to lived in Australia for a while and was an international swimmer for Australia in her junior years. So I did have a lot of sports background. But I just started playing short tennis in my school gymnasium with a sponge ball and little rackets and took to it. That was at 8. And a few months later, I was in the British Nationals, and I think I finished in the top 8 at under 8 level. So it just sort of came easily to me, I think. Tennis, I believe, I don't know how you think, but is the hardest sport in the world. It was something that I asked Francis Tiafoe about on the beach in Acapulco, and he agreed with me. It's a big quote on social media. But I think tennis is so difficult, but I did find it easy in the early stages when I was playing without fear, without worry, without anxiety, which of course soon caught me quite heavily at sort of the age of 13. But I do love it now, even more perhaps than I ever did. I was probably a better doubles player, more of a team person, really. Tennis and doubles specialist wasn't really a thing, though, when I was growing up. So, of course, it was all about the singles. But I do wish if I'd go back, I would have just played doubles.
Yeah, I do remember that quote now that you bring it up. And I would say I've always vouched for tennis players as the most well-rounded of all the athletes and what it takes. And I'd say the combination of mental and physical toughness that it takes is second to none. Also, you said something that just piques my interest too, because having family in cricket, I just wonder why it doesn't take off more in America. Like I see worldwide and I hear people talking about it, but in America, it just hasn't stuck, cricket.
I think, America does have a cricket team. We lived
Getting
in
there.
Atlanta, as you know, for 18 years, and there's quite a lot of Asian influence in the cricket. A lot of youngsters playing, both girls and boys, which is nice to see. And of course, it's massive, isn't it, in the Commonwealth countries, except for Canada, probably, with a lot of Australian, New Zealand, and English players playing. It's a unique game. I actually spent a large amount of my childhood on weekends waiting for my father to finish his cricket matches. He batted number 3 and was not a risk taker. So there were a lot of games where he just batted from the beginning almost to the end.
So getting kind of your tennis career and someone in your nature that played competitively, covers it, has been involved in the game for life. What's something that people don't realize on the outside about life as a junior tennis player? Like how competitive, how brutal at times it can be? What's something that, as someone that lived it, you can tell the audience is something they don't quite understand? It's unique about it.
Well, everyone talks about the hard work and it's exemplified. It's sort of gone 10 times these days because I do work with a few under 14 players that are really, really good. And you just see how much effort they're putting in. But I think the thing that struck me when I played Junior Wimbledon, I think I was 17. And it was the year that Martina Hingis was 13 and won it. And everyone was talking about Martina Hingis. And I saw her in the lunch queue and I was standing behind her. And I'm one, Mitch, I'm sure you're the same, to strike up conversation at all times if possible. So I started chatting to her, and it was just phenomenal because she really revealed that she was playing full time at the age of 13, probably playing 20 hours a week or doing tennis related activities that much. And I was probably doing about quarter of that because I was going to a proper school, doing
Right.
exams as normal at quite an academic school. So I think that is the thing that most people don't realize, how from the age of 8 now, really, players are almost full time. There's so
Yeah.
many people that are going homeschooling. I had an academy in America for a few years after I gave up the broadcasting career when I had young kids. And I just realized what a difference it makes if you can
Yeah.
really put your whole life into tennis. So I think that's the answer I'd give you, the hours spent doing it.
Sports specialization's a hot button topic. You're seeing, debates on both sides. Obviously, hours on court, getting your 10,000 hours is going to help you be a better player. But we have seen, to play the counterpoint to that, players that have been later bloomers, players in one American's case, in Ben Shelton, that didn't even specialize until he was older. I think that there is something to be said. I mean, you have to be committed as an athlete, but there is something to be said about maybe being a balanced athlete. And in Martina Hingis's case, Candy, not getting to that burnout level where she clearly just had too much because she had played too much by that point.
You're right. Well, I actually host a podcast, I'm sure you're aware of it, with Mark Gellard, the coach of Magda Linette. And he was the hitting partner and coach of Martina Hingis. And he had just graduated from college when he got the job. And he said he found it hard to keep up with Hingis. She spent so much time running on the beach. It was just exceptional. He had never seen anything like it. And he's a 23-year-old guy who's just graduated from playing college tennis and said he
Wow.
couldn't keep up with her. So that is just outstanding, but it shows you what another level she was. But as for playing multi-sports, I actually think I lost a beat when I stopped doing that because I played all the sports from my school. So in England, we played netball, field hockey, tennis, and we swam, did a lot of cross country as well. And when at 14 and 15, I started really specializing in tennis, actually my fitness went downhill and I got a lot more injured. So I think actually playing multi-sports for as long as you possibly can is the way to go. Because another thing we know in tennis now is that it's a long career. You can play into your 30s. But I was told, I remember at 16, that if you weren't winning $10,000 equivalent tournaments, which are now worth $15,000 on the ITF level, within about 3 months, you weren't going to make it. So there was more of a rush to get to the top.
Yeah.
Whereas I think players are understanding now that you can take a bit more time.
Certainly. And I hope that changes some thinking or amends it in a few different ways. In your particular case, did you go to Tennessee, have a storied career there? Were you looking at college as a means to get to your next career? Did you kind of sour? Because I know you played on the satellite tour for a little bit, but how did you get to the decision of, I'm going to go to America, I'm going to go to college, and then we'll see what doors that opens from there?
Well, this was a funny one. I was in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, playing a $25,000 tournament. And it was in my gap year. So after I finished my A levels at 18, I took a year off and went and played on the tour, as you said, the ITF tour. And I was in this hotel room. There was very little in English. And I started watching CNN because it was the only thing on. And I remember seeing Christian Amanpour in the middle of some war zone and thinking, that's actually what I want to do. I don't really want to play tennis full time. At that point, I think at 17, I realized I wasn't really going to be good enough. And I didn't really want to be that player sitting at 150, 200 in the world, just scraping a living and living essentially out of a suitcase. So that's when it hit me. But from 16, the goal was always to go to US college and really give tennis a go. And I'd already made a plan, and I did love it enough where I thought I could definitely play for 4 more years. And I have to say that going to US college and playing tennis at the University of Tennessee in this case was the best thing I've ever done. I absolutely loved every minute of it.
Just to recap, so you went and saw someone on TV in a war zone. You said, that's a life for me over playing tennis. I'm sure, no, that's just funny to think about it that way. But I know it. And I heard that story and it made me think like you were just focused on, that's what I want to do. I'm going to devote myself like an athlete to that goal. You do go to Tennessee, have the 4-year career, academic All-American as well. But what was the culture shock like going from the UK to Knoxville, Tennessee?
It was massive because I hadn't done a recruiting trip. I actually applied to this company called College Prospects of America. I think my parents paid the lady in charge about £250, so $300 or so. And every night, once the application went in, I cannot tell you how many phone calls we received. It got to the point where after 8 p.m. in England, we had to just take the phone off the hook. It was landlines then. It was absolutely bonkers. And then we got a call, or I think a communication from Mike Patrick, who was the head of University of Tennessee. And he just came over. He literally didn't give me an answer to say no. He just appeared at Gatwick Airport. We picked him up. He stayed for a couple of days. And I essentially just signed with him on the spot. He'd worked with Lindsay Davenport a little bit. I think when she was a junior, and it sounded good. I wanted to pick the best tennis university closest to CNN. So, see, I had a game plan.
Yeah.
And Knoxville was 3 hours from Atlanta, Georgia. So I had it all worked out. And that's how I came to become a Lady Vol.
Wow. Yeah. And I was thinking too, like the Tennessee program, men's and women's, have done exceptional in the last couple of years. You were also there when their basketball team was in the beginning stages of a dynasty. So, yeah, the women's team. So there's a history of athletic excellence there. But I know in your case, you got to experience college tennis, competitive tennis, and also, be accustomed to American culture. And then from there, it was that break at CNN International, which is, if I have this right, that was the first and main, you didn't have to go bounce around from jobs. It was right to CNN on the production side and then work your way up from there.
That's it, straight in. So I did an internship as a tour guide in my junior year. So I showed people around the whole CNN center, which was incredible when it was at CNN. It's now moved to Techwood, I believe. And then the next year I got an internship both in the news and the sports department. And the news internship, I remember the gentleman I think that had given me it went away for a couple of weeks and I hadn't signed any paperwork. And I was due to graduate and I was a bit worried that he may come back and decide on someone else. So the sports department was sort of pushing me to sign. So I did. And I have to say that was really a good decision because I absolutely love sport. It's my whole life. 90% of sport is good, 10% bad, and probably the exact opposite in news. So I got an internship at the sports department. I got hired right afterwards as a production assistant. I started editing, having had a radio show and worked on a television show in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I just sort of fitted in right away. And it was just a perfect fit, really.
So how did you develop your style for your approach to when you were in front of the camera, when you were doing upfronts, doing stand-ups, interviewing athletes? How did you practice that? How did you develop that? And how did you kind of gain the confidence to do it, not just in the mirror on a college radio station, but in front of a much bigger audience?
Well, I did lots of practice. As you probably worked out by now, I was quite driven. I had a goal in mind and I had a wonderful boss, the best boss I've ever had, a guy called Howard Sappington. He's now moved to the Weather Channel from CNN, but he knew what I wanted to do. So I was doing sort of behind the scenes for a year. I taught myself to produce, to edit everything, but I took any advantage I had when the set was free to go on. And everyone was so kind that they put the graphics up and the font, they put my name and they made it really professional. And I had all the clips because I could edit it all myself. I could produce the whole lineup myself. So I did 3 to 5 minute bulletins of sport and I just kept going. Howard kept giving me feedback. And then came the news that I was going on. And I have to say, I did not sleep a wink for about a week the day before I went on and made my CNN debut. But I haven't looked back since. And it was just such a huge moment for me. I'm sure everybody in my position has had something similar, but it was really just somebody taking a chance on an unknown kid.
And understanding the business, I can speak personally to this too, from the production side, how to edit, how to produce behind the camera before being in front of it is just such a valuable piece of information and way to approach things. So that'd be my advice to anybody young out there listening is it's good to develop multiple skills and have different perspectives. I guess from there, and a question I've always had for people in your position, but how do you bounce back when it's not your best day? You can bounce back from a bad match in a certain way, but if you don't have your best day, how have you learned to get over that? How have you learned to move on to the next day and the next set of challenges?
The best piece of advice, Mitch, I've ever been given is it's never as good as you think and it's never as bad as you think. And that is so true because sometimes you come off air having done a half an hour show on your own and you just think, wow, that I was good today. And nobody says anything. And other times you think, oh, I really messed that up. I couldn't get my words out and no one seems to notice. I do remember, I think one of the worst moments was calling a golfer. I don't know why I said this, but I think I said that she had blue hair and blonde eyes. That
Mm,
one is something that reminds me and sort of has uh, a bit of a nightmare once in a while. But I think there weren't too many really bad days. I was pretty level headed. And I think that's another thing from playing at the level of tennis I did, that you get knocked down an awful lot and you have to
yeah.
jump back up again the next day and give it a go. And your pride is continually bashed because, as most tennis players know, unless you're the top of the tree like the Nadals and the Djokovic's, you lose a lot more than you win. So you just get really, really resilient.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I grew up playing competitive ice hockey, and we have a phrase, you're only as good as your last shift. So it's always about what you can do the next time you get a chance to perform. No, it's inspiring stuff. And we're going to get to the Olympics here. Your story's a great one. And I'm very intrigued by it. The last thing on this front I have, Candy, is that when you gotten the chance to interview not just great tennis players, I know you've interviewed Tiger Woods, you've interviewed players in other sports and real all time legends. What's something or some things you've learned from them and interviewing them, and maybe just how they conduct themselves or how they think about things, their craft, or the outside world?
Well, I have to say, the biggest interview I did, and I think it was within maybe a month or two of going on air, was with my idol growing up, Andre Agassi. I remember exactly where I was when he won Wimbledon. My coach was Ian Hughes, who's now the coach of Magda Linette, has worked with Alina Svitolina, Belinda Bencic, Katerina Siniakova, just to name a few.
Mhm.
Was an Andre Agassi lookalike. So he grew his hair, he had the shorts, he had the shoes, everything. And I, in fact, had black Nike shoes as well. They just didn't work with me because I was sort of long, tall, very, very pale with these black shoes. And I remember my national team coach, Olga Morozova, who was a Wimbledon finalist, telling me I had to take the shoes off because they were far too heavy. My footwork was poor anyway. But that was a huge moment for me, Andre. And then I have interviewed Roger Federer multiple times. And I think those two are the ones that stick out because of how gracious and nice they were. They remembered my name, which was lovely. They asked me questions, which was so weird because I was there to talk to them. But I think that's the biggest thing that sticks out when you've got these people that are geniuses, the top of their sport, and they're so humble and nice, and they're interested in other people. That just blows me away, and I still think that is remarkable each and every time.
I'm just so glad Andre is back involved in the game.
Yeah.
It's nice to see him around, seeing him at the Hall of Fame Open, and it's a great story about his humility and where he is and the wisdom he imparted on you. As we move along here with Candy Reid on Tennis Channel Inside In, she's calling in from Paris, the journalist who is covering the Paris Olympics, which are heating up right now. The women's quarterfinals are set. The men have some work to do, one round behind to get to the quarterfinal round. It'll all wrap up this Saturday and Sunday. So we're excited to talk tennis. And before we get into some of the storylines and results, Candy, I just wanted to mention too, I mean, you've been involved in the game for so long. It feels like the Olympics, at least in my perspective, in the last couple cycles, the importance is ramped up. We've seen players buying in, and anyone that's here, regardless of their stature, whether it's world number 200 or the number one player in the world, you put that uniform on, you put your country's insignia on your shirt or your dress. It just means something different that pro tennis, pro sports can't really provide.
I agree with that. Tennis back in the Olympics since 1988 in Seoul, when, of course, Steffi Graf did the double, won Roland Garros, and then the Olympics, something that Iga Swiatek's trying to do. And, of course, that year, Steffi Graf also completed the Golden Slam and got that diamond-encrusted racket. I remember that as well. In 1988, she's the only person to win all four majors and an Olympic gold medal in the same year. That is just mind-blowing, isn't it, given how difficult that is? But I think the players are really embracing the Olympics these days. I don't know for many of them if a gold medal is right up there with, say, winning Wimbledon. I think that's a question for them. But Alexander Zverev will say it's very high on his list. He, of course, won in Tokyo and hasn't got a major, although he's come really close on a couple of occasions. But they are just buying in. The atmosphere at Roland Garros, Mitch, has been unbelievable because, of course, at the French Open every year you get really educated tennis fans and there's a great atmosphere as well. But here at the Olympics, it's been a bit of a mix of really high tennis IQ fans, but also people maybe watching it for the first time. There's been singing, there's been dancing. I did the match between Ugo and Burr yesterday, and Francisco Cerundolo. Sorry, I've done so many matches, it's hard to remember
Yeah.
sometimes. And the Argentine actually won the match. But the atmosphere was incredible because, of course, Ugo and Burr is France's #1, just ahead of Artifice. And he was smiling throughout, even though he lost. It finished 7-5 in the third. It was on the third court, Simone Mathieu, the greenhouse court. And I can't tell you what that atmosphere was like. I was smiling throughout the match. Both players were. And it was just the best feeling. And everyone wants a gold medal. I think they'd take any medal. One of the funniest things I heard from Madison Keys was when she finished 4th and she said, I got a certificate. I mean, how demoralizing is that? Gold, silver, bronze, and a certificate.
Yeah, I would also just point out it is nice to consistently see the lower bowl filled at Roland Garros. That's kind of a nice thing stepped up. But you're right, this crowd has been tremendous. And yeah, you have your compatriots cheering you on, which we saw. And I wanted to start with the Nadal Djokovic match, the 60th time that those two played. Djokovic wins that match. He advances along. As you're listening to this, he's still marching along this tournament, although we're recording on a Tuesday, so we'll see how this goes. But if it is the last time these two play, Candy, I know that it's not, in Rafa's case, the form he's used to. We'll see what his future looks like. It was a special moment to see those two out there. It was special to see Rafa fight at the end, but you can't help but think this is not obviously what we're used to. And it's an Nadal that is winding down, because there were moments in that match where you say the Rafa of old wouldn't let it get to this point, wouldn't make errors. Unfortunately, that father time is undefeated phrase rings true. And Djokovic is the one moving on in their 60th meeting.
Incredible, isn't it? They play 60 times. I think it's now 31 to Novak and 29 to Rafa. I was actually in Barcelona when Rafa sort of made his comeback. I think a lot of people weren't sure if he was actually going to play. He did. And he beat Alex de Minaur. He just seems like he plays a tough match, didn't he? Like at Borstad, that 3 hour and 59-minute match. And then he lost the next day. And then again here, he had a tough one against Marton Fucsovics, and just didn't have the energy to come through against Novak. But it was a tight second set. And I don't know about you, Mitch. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I think Nadal's got some more in him. I don't think the end is coming anytime soon.
I'm curious, because I agree there's definitely stuff there, and it was tight. Novak actually got a little nervous there when it was 4-love up and he couldn't hold serve. It just shows you, too, it doesn't take much. The margins at the top are so thin. These players are all great. It's not one overwhelming weakness. It's lose a little on your serve. Your footwork's just a little off. You've got, as you said, you played a long match against Fucsovics in the round before. It's tough. And I think he's at that point where, similar to Serena Williams at the end of her career, in one match with his competitive fire, it's hard to really bet against him. But the run of a tournament, especially one like this, maybe more so one like this, where you're playing so many matches, it's tough. But yeah, I'm not making any predictions on his future, because I'm not going to count him out.
And how good was that doubles match? I actually got to commentate on that with Ravi Uber, and we did Carlos Alcaraz and Rafa Nadal teaming up for the first time. And Carlitos just looked like a bit of a young pup in the early games. He looked a bit nervous playing with his idol. There's 17 years between them. And Rafa has been a mentor to Carlos. Of course, Carlos now the better player on paper anyway. But that was just an incredible match. And Rafa Nadal playing against the 6 seeds, Gonzalez and Molteni, who've won a couple of titles this year, was spanking returns. He was the best player on the court. Unbelievable. Yeah. Something that I've asked professional doubles players, Mitch, before. I remember at the Australian Open last year, we had a thing where we were speaking about players, ideal players. So they pick somebody with the backhand, somebody with the forehand, etc. And a lot of the guys were saying, I'd pick Nadal as my net player because he's got the best hands in tennis. Yeah. And it's true. His hands at the net are just off the charts. He's so fast.
Underrated doubles player for sure. Won the gold medal in Rio with Mark Lopez. So he's somebody that has shown he can play, and with the lefty game is perfect. Yeah, I thought Alcaraz was a little nervous at first. I bet if you gave him some truth serum, he would have said he's more nervous for that than his singles campaign, just not wanting to let him down. But now it's funny because I saw him rubbing off on Rafa. He got Rafa to smile a little bit during their match. So I actually think, too, I mean, we can talk storylines and things, but doubles has been one of the top storylines, especially on the men's side, because you have that team, Murray and Evans, just staying alive. They win again today as we record this, 11-9 in the third set breaker again. But The first match against the Japanese team was a joke. It was an escape act is what it was. 9-4 in a tiebreak, all those match points.
And
And they
Dan
find a way to
Evans
get it
said that
done.
he didn't want to be the guy that sent Andy Murray into retirement. He was determined not to make an error. But Andy Murray
Yeah.
was also saying, I wasn't thinking about retirement or anything. I was thinking about where I'm going to serve and where I'm going to hit the next ball, because he is just, and Mitch, I think most people in Great Britain would agree, but in my opinion, he is Great Britain's best ever sportsman or woman. I think he's just knocked it out of the park. He's got 2 gold medals. He's won Wimbledon. He's won the US Open. The guy is absolutely formidable.
He does it all, and he shows that competitive fight. It's great to see. The doubles players, there's still some American teams left. There's some great storylines and drama there. Other drama, and I know we're bouncing around, but I want to give props to, has been overshadowed, Angie Kerber, what she's been doing at 36 on a surface that I also want to point out is not her best. I think easily one of her worst. She's getting it done. She's into the quarterfinals in her last tournament at 36 and just doing it the hard way, finding a way through. Angie Kerber, getting some of that Danielle Collins vibes of, hey, I'm going out, might as well just play freely. Full marks to her for what she's done. An improbable run to the quarterfinals and beyond, maybe.
It's the same thing, isn't it, as the Danielle Collins? Danielle Collins has been outstanding at the time of recording. She is still in line for an Olympic medal, as is Angie Kerber. I actually saw Andrea Petkovic, your Tennis Channel colleague, today. We're great friends. Petkovic is one of the best. And I remember her saying on a podcast that she thinks Angie Kerber, if she'd had a serve like a Serena Williams, how many major titles would she have won? Because Kerber off the ground can beat literally anyone. Playing in just one of those games where you feed the ball in, play to 21, I don't think Kerber would have been beaten in her prime. She's now got a daughter. Of course, the priorities have shifted. And she said the Olympics is going to be her last tournament. She's going to be missed. And I think she may be reconsidering that statement right now because she's playing and doing brilliantly.
Yeah, Petkovic told me, about Andrea. She's been on this show a few times. She said that what made her the most jealous about Angie was she can adjust and knock rust off a lot faster. So it doesn't take her long to just calibrate right and be back in shape. So props to her. On the women's side, you called the Iga match today. She's into the quarterfinals, the overwhelming favorite to win the gold medal in women's singles. Coming back to the court where she's dominated in the last several French Opens. It was a little tighter today than she expected. Still a straight sets win. Candy, we want to know what her form looks like as the competition ramps up. There's no challenge too great for her here, but she is going to start with Danielle Collins playing some tougher competition.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for Iga Swiatek. She's not, I don't think, at her top level, but she did play Wang Zhiyu, the left-hander from China, who I have to say I went out to Roland Garros yesterday morning when I had some time off and watched her beat Diana Schneider, who's won a couple of titles this year. And she was hitting the ball harder, Zhiyu, than I've ever seen. And she came out really well today against Iga Swiatek. Broke the pole a couple of times, had more chances to break. She didn't take them. So Iga perhaps a little relieved, but she just has that star power, doesn't she? I think she's now won 22 straight matches on clay courts, including, of course, at Roland Garros, who won Rome. She's absolutely dominated the clay court scene. Didn't really, I don't think, put a huge amount of effort into the grass court season. She pulled out of Berlin, didn't play any warm-ups into Wimbledon, and then her streak was beaten and taken out by Yulia Putintseva. She's come to win gold. She's got to be the overwhelming favourite. But I think the big hitters are the ones that can cause Iga some problems. But mentally, you've got to believe that she's going to go for gold.
It's a different type of pressure, as we know, right? It only comes around 4 years. You got national pride. She did become the first Polish man or woman to make the quarterfinals. So in tennis, so that's a huge accomplishment. She gets Danielle Collins, who, shockingly enough, Candy, the last American woman left, the only one to make the final 8. We'll get to some of the others in a second, but Collins fighting again through, beats Osorio, is into the final 8, has had some battles, but this Danielle Collins, how she's reacting here, she's just very grateful and appreciative of being an Olympian. It's cool to see. There is a much more of a appreciation that she's wearing the stars and stripes and playing in this tournament and playing well.
She battled so hard as well, didn't she, to make the USA team, because it wasn't looking particularly likely at the beginning of the year. And then she went on that unbelievable run, winning on both hard and clay. And from then on, she was a certainty. It was just that 4th spot, wasn't it? Whether Madison Keys or Emma Navarro were going to take it behind Pegula and Coco Gauff, who'd solidified early. I think Danielle Collins has been the story, really, of 2024. I think she's got an English boyfriend. She spent Christmas over here training at the NTC in Roehampton. And she strikes me as one of those players, a little bit like Yulia Putintseva, who calls herself a gangster on the court and an angel off the court. Danielle Collins is so personable, but you just never know which one you're going to get. And she does give people a piece of her mind if she's not in the greatest shape mentally on court. But she's just hilarious, I think, to watch. I absolutely love it when I get to commentate on Danielle Collins matches. And why can't she go all the way? She'll believe it. Absolutely, she will.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. We'll see. At the time of this episode releasing, you'll know who won, but it's going to be a fun one for sure. The other big shocker of the day was Coco Gauff lost in straight sets to Donna Vekic. Want to first and foremost give props to Vekic. Wins that match in straights, makes history. It had been, I believe, 28 years since a Croatian went as far. So she does it the hard way because it wasn't looking good in that first set, but she battled through and then won the second going away. Disappointing loss, though, for Coco Gauff, Candy, because there was the call that we can get into, but there was just some errors and inefficiencies. And I did feel like it was a pressure situation where the weight of the moment kind of got to her a little bit. And while we'll never doubt the long-term, potential of this already Grand Slam champion, it was not a good day at the office. And when you're playing top players in single elimination, this is what can happen.
I actually did first two matches of Coco Gauff. And I was interested to see how she was, because I also commentated on the match she lost to Emma Navarro at Wimbledon, where I thought Coco self-destructed both physically and mentally. The forehand completely went off. She was looking at her coaches, Brad Gilbert and Jean-Christophe Forel, and asking them what to do. I've never seen that from Coco. That happened at the round of 16 at the Wimbledon Championships, Navarro beating Coco. So I was really interested to see how she came out of the blocks here at Roland Garros. She does manage to reset, doesn't she, when things don't go her way? But there were and there are some chinks in the armour still. And it is that forehand. And when it's bullied, it does break down. The racket head speed just gets slower and slower. And you can see her almost getting into her own head and start worrying about it. The fear comes in the eyes. And I think I did 400 matches in commentary last year. I probably are going to surpass that this year. And you can just tell, Mitch, by a player's eyes, how exactly they're feeling. Some disguise it better than others. And Coco just has that fear and she starts worrying about it. And you can see that if a player starts to bully that side, it's going to break down. I don't know what she's going to do about it. She almost needs to go away and almost fix it. But that's going to be a 6 month, though. It's not something you can change overnight, the grip change. And I know Brad Gilbert is trying to work with it and make it better. But I don't know. I think if she's going to have a long-term future and win more majors, lots more, then I think she's going to have to do something about it. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And I'm not an expert in that department, but it just seems like there's too many worries about it.
That's my concern, too, in regards to your point about the eyes. And I think it's unfortunate things affect her, like things linger. When something happens, whether self-inflicted or otherwise, you can tell it lingers a little bit. And that's something that would worry me, too. And yeah, I think Brad Gilbert and the team have done a good job with managing it. But yeah, it's a tough one. Do you overhaul the forehand at the expense of short-term results? Because that's probably what it would take. And just a quick point, too, and I know people are out there listening wondering, I don't think the umpire made a mistake in how that call was, how he interpreted the rule, I think was 100%. I don't think the call, the overrule, affected her shot. The rule itself, if you want to get into and you want to nitpick that, that's fine. But in the moment, I don't equate that at all to what happened at Roland Garros, which was much more egregious. And I think the umpire did what he could in that situation. It's unfortunate the break went against Coco, Candy, but that is part of tennis. Breaks will not go your way, as you very well know.
I hate that rule, though, Mitch. I just think it needs to go out of the window. I think if there's any chance at all, when there's a wrong call, an overruled call, they're not sure which way it goes. Did the player hit the ball after the call or before the call? I think just replay the point. It makes it much fairer.
Yeah. Do you think if there was, and this we can move on, but do you think with video review, if there was that, would that have changed how, because I guess there's two different sides of it. If there's video review, you can see whether the call directly impacted it, which I get that argument. Or we can just do a replay it if it's any doubt whatsoever.
Either way, I think it's just better. But it was just awful. Coco was in tears after that. And once she came back after, she did win a few points. And of course, the crowd were really getting behind her. She's so likable. And she's so brilliant for tennis, the highest paid female athlete of last year. And there's a reason why. And she takes it all in stride. She is absolutely essential for the game. She's got one major title. She should be winning loads more in the future. There's plenty of time for that to happen. But that was just a horrible call. And it's sort of, it adds, doesn't it? You've had one and then another, and you think the world's against you when you're not winning. I just think I'd like to see that rule scrapped. Let's bring in video replay. Let's do whatever we can to avoid that kind of situation in the future.
So the other women's storylines today, you had Marta Kostyuk win an epic over Maria Sakkari. You saw what it meant to her to be, emotionally winning for Ukraine. You also saw Barbara Krejcikova win her 10th straight match. So she's on fire, winning in singles and doubles, seeing where she goes. And then, as we were talking before we started, the most chippy match of the day was Qinwen Zheng defeating Emma Navarro, saving match point down in the second set. Set down, match point down in a break, and battling all the way back. And Navarro taking issue to some things that happened in that match, said she doesn't necessarily respect her as a player. Qinwen said, well, I'll try to be a better person, but I don't take that as an attack because she lost the match and I won. So it was a little spicy out there, Candy, between those two.
Gosh, I actually didn't see it, but I was following along with the score because I was prepping for the Alexander Zverev match today. He played Thomas Mahatch, which was really entertaining. But I was hearing all about it, so I'd love to know your point of view. But Emma Navarro just seems so laid back. She, like Danielle Collins, another story for another reason, though, because, of course, her career is just getting started. She graduated, or no, she didn't graduate. She did 2 years, didn't she, at US College? And obviously, we know her father, Ben. But sometimes, having so much money behind you doesn't give you the motivation to get to the best of your sport, which I think has been so impressive about Jessie Pegula and Sorana Cîrstea from Romania as well. She comes from a wealthy background, and perhaps that makes it harder to get to the high points. But I just think Emma Navarro is so cool and collected. She's so brilliant in 3-set matches. Nothing seems to get under her skin, but you'll tell me differently today.
I was shocked, too, for everything you just said. In fact, a friend texted me, did you see what Emma said? And I thought Raducanu, and I couldn't have even thought it was Navarro. That said, Qinwen is not someone, I've been bullish on her potential to be one of the power players in the game. There's been a few times, and I didn't see every single point in this match, but she won't back down from confrontation either. And I love that about her. So I don't know exactly what happened. Qinwen and Emma are maybe a new rivalry. They're young enough to where they're going to be near the top of the game. And that was spicy, and maybe it was a one-off. But for Qinwen, she's into the quarterfinals and very dangerous to make a run going forward. So
I will tell you a story quickly about Qinwen or Qinwen or however you say her name. But this is unbelievable. And this is probably a reason why she's hard as nails. At 7 years old, her parents took her to a tennis academy for a trial. What they didn't tell her is if she got accepted, she was staying there alone. 7 years old. And it happened. She went, she passed, her parents left her there. Can you imagine? I think her grandparents, she said, came and visited her once in a while. Of course, the parents did too, but it was in a completely different city. We know how big China is. So I think that probably hardens you when you're living essentially on your own at a tennis academy and trying to make it as a pro from the age of 7. What were you doing at 7 years old, Mitch?
Yeah, definitely not that. Probably riding bikes or something around the neighborhood. I will say a lot of thoughts running through my mind right now. Not sure how to react to or process that, but it worked out for her and her family in the long run, I guess. Congrats to everyone that won on the women's side. We're going to wrap it up here with Candy Reid on Tennis Channel Inside In. Just some thoughts on the men's side before we head out the door. Seems like Alcaraz is the top dog, as deservedly so, how he's looked on this court and beyond, winning RG and Wimbledon. Novak Djokovic's quest for that gold medal is still alive. Those two, you've also got the sleepers on the men's side. I think we're ready for it to ramp up, Candy, right? Because you have Zverev, Tsitsipas is making moves. We'll see what ends up happening. But how would you assess where the men's singles tournament is going?
Yeah, a few big names pulled out, didn't they, before the tournament began? It was a shame that Sinner couldn't make it. We were hearing he was ill. I think it was tonsillitis, and then Holger Rune, who I was with in Hamburg. Well, he pulled out of Hamburg apparently with a knee injury, but he was clearly flexing his wrist against the eventual champion Artur Fils. So I'm not surprised it was the wrist that stopped him. And of course, Hubie Hurkacz, injured at Wimbledon, couldn't play, but it's turned out to be a great draw. Novak Djokovic, for my mind, has the bit between his teeth. He wants this more than anything else. I don't think anyone's going to pass the 24 majors now. But what he doesn't have is Jimmy Connor's record of 109 titles. and he doesn't have an Olympic gold medal. So that's the one he's going to go all out for. He's been seen supporting Serbia in other events alongside his family. He seems pretty relaxed, but we know that when Novak Djokovic has something in his mind, he's going to try and achieve it. Alcaraz, as you say, he won Roland Garros this year for the first time. He is just immense on all surfaces, doesn't have a weak spot at all, and he's so fun to watch. And then the other contender, I think, for my mind, Mitch, has got to be Alexander Zverev. He won gold in Tokyo. He's a top 4 player. He almost defended his Hamburg title in the run-up to this, but he was struggling a little bit with a knee, which caused him a little trouble at the end of that 5-set thriller against Taylor Fritz at Wimbledon. But he was actually ill during that Hamburg final. He felt dizzy, and he said to the trainer, I am not giving this match up. He was born in Hamburg, tried to win it again. It was 3 hours and 33 minutes against Artefis, who's definitely one to watch. He's now in the top 20 and only 20 years of age. But I think for my mind, Mitch is going to be one of those 3 claiming gold.
Yeah, also Zverev in that match had like 20 plus break points and converted on one of them. So could have gone the other way. I agree with that assessment. I'd also just add, see what the Americans can do. Tommy Paul has a favorable matchup against Mutet. You've also got Fritz Musetti, which could be a good one. So I agree with your assessment, though. Where it is, Djokovic most motivated, Alcaraz best form, best overall player. Zverev has done this before, and if Zverev would have been in best of 3 matches in Roland Garros, he'd be the champion right now. So
absolutely,
I think that's going to be exciting. I think storyline-wise, if we do get that Djokovic-Alcaraz match, of course, that would be something, but don't count out these other talented players, too. Exciting stuff here with Candy Reid from Paris. This has been a fun chat on the podcast. Last thing before I let you go, what's next coming up for you? And I know you have that Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach podcast, too. So more episodes coming up on that front, and in general, what's next on the agenda for your career?
Yeah, thanks for the plug for the podcast. We're getting some good guests. We've had Craig Tyser a couple of times, the former coach of Ash Barty, Pat Cash. We've had Victor Cravoy, the coach of Arena Camellia Begu, who gave Iga Swiatek a bit of a test in the first round. I really like the sort of delving in deep into the coach and what they do and their perspective on life, because it's different, obviously, from the player. But next up for me is Toronto and Cincinnati for the WTA. And then I go to New York for 3 weeks. I'll be doing qualifying, and then the 2 weeks of main draw for the US Open, which I absolutely love. I am a US citizen. I have dual nationality, having been in America for 22 years. So it's a country very, very close to my heart. I absolutely love New York. So many of my tennis friends come up from Atlanta and from the University of Tennessee. My roommate lives in Huntington, Long Island, so she comes along. So it's just one big party, and we're just treated so well at the US Open. It's unbelievable what a good job everybody does there. And then after that, I've got Bologna for the Davis Cup. Italy, of course, will be hosting and defending champions. And then my last travel assignment, apart from Jeddah for the next gen, will be Beijing for the ATP. So I've got quite a lot of exciting stuff happening. I have to say, Mitch, I'm sure you agree, but I have the best job in the world.
Seems like it. That's like a player's schedule, too, just factoring out your calendar. And yeah, I think that should be the slogan at the US Open this year, just one big party. And it always seems that way. Candy Reid, this has been a pleasure. Best of luck with everything, calling and covering the Paris Olympics with the podcast Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach, working for all your different platforms. We appreciate you coming on this show. Thanks for the chat. Thanks for the conversation. And of course, we'll do it again. But thank you, Candy Reid, for coming on Tennis Channel Inside In.
Thank you, Mitch. You are the maestro. I absolutely love your podcast, and you are such a brilliant host. I have to say, 10 out of 10.
Oh, now you're buttering me up.
It's
Thank
true.
you, though, Candy. Appreciate it.